is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
25K that I got for Atari doing Pac Man turned out to be the best investment I ever made. I only did video games that did not feature violence against people. Really? And I end up in weapon systems.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Ronald Borta was co-founder of JACC, Just Another Computer Company, which made educational software under contract for Atari, where he programmed Atari States and Capitals and Atlas of Canada, and other software for the Atari 400 and 800 computers. He moved to Roklan Software, the company that programmed hundreds of titles for the Atari computers and other platforms of the time. Roklan published a number of cartridges for the Atari computers, including Deluxe Invaders and Gorf. The company also produced Pac Man, published by Atari, Gyruss, published by Parker Brothers, Wizard of War, published by CBS, Mickey in the Great Outdoors, published by Disney, and myriad other game and educational titles. The company also created software for the Atari 2600 and 5200, Apple II, Commodore 64 and VIC-20, Texas Instruments 99.4A, ColecoVision, Intellivision, and other platforms. Ron is also known as the first person to have patented software in the United States. This interview took place on December 9th, 2016.
I was actually working in field service at a company called OSE, which is a huge international conglomerate. And I was fixing all kinds of microfilm equipment and blueprint equipment and a wide variety of industrial machines. And I needed to put together a training program for repairing one of our machines because we hired a company called Sorbus to do some work for us in areas where we didn't have enough representation. So I flew out to King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and worked on this video training course. And while I was there, they showed me something that they fixed for somebody else. It was called a Basic 4 computer. It was called a mini computer, but it filled an entire room.
Right.
And on that machine, they had a game called Star Trek. They showed me how it played, and I was kind of hooked. So after 8 hours of working on a training program, I would spend another 5, 6, 7 hours on that computer playing Star Trek. On the plane home, I had done some research, and I started designing a computer based on the 8080 computer chip because I wanted to play Star Trek. Little did I know the 8080 chip didn't really work very well. So, I tried and never really got it to work the way it should. And then, lo and behold, Intel came out with the 8080A and the timing chip to go with it. And suddenly, I was back playing Star Trek and Hunt the Wumpus and all kinds of other text-based video games. It was kind of primitive, but I kind of got into it. And one thing led to another. Next thing I knew, I had an MSI 8080 computer. I had a Radio Shack computer. I had all kinds of odds and ends. And it kind of took over my life. So when I left Bell and Howell, I should say I left OSE to go to work at Northrop Defense Systems Division because they wanted me to come and start up a new group dedicated to microcomputers. So I went there and I trained people, I designed machines, I did all kinds of things based on 8080 chips and 8086 chips and anything else I could get my hands on. And then we started buying boards from Intel, and I started working really close with Intel on all their new products, and it was really a whole lot of fun. And then another fellow who worked there decided that the best thing for us to do would be to leave Northrop and start our own software company. I think I was 21 at the time.
Wow. And who was this fellow?
A fellow by the name of Todd Zipnick.
He was a colleague of yours?
Yeah, at Northrop. He ended up building up his own company, which he later sold to, I can't remember, one of the big, at the time, big software companies that did video games and such.
Cool. What was his software company that he founded?
I'm trying to remember the name of it. We're going back a long, long time here.
Sure, yeah.
But you could probably Google Zipnik and find it. He unfortunately died at an early age, right after he sold his company. But anyway, I went on to, we started a company called JACC, the two of us and two other guys. Okay. And we picked up a couple clients really quick, like IBM, Microsoft, the company that made VisiCalc, I can't remember the name of it.
Personal Software published it.
Personal Software, yeah, Dan Filestra, yes. Mm-hmm. And so we worked with a lot of the early guys. I remember Dan Brickman coming up to me. And then we picked up a client called NEC, who was building what became the first PC 8001. It was before IBM picked up on the term PC. And we did that at the National Computer Conference back in 1982. Wow. I remember that well. So the four of us ran this little company, and we were doing all kinds of interesting software, a lot of it around Ataris, a little bit around Radio Shack stuff.
So what was the name of this company?
JACC. It stood for Just Another Computer Company.
Of course it did.
It was very creative.
So what kind of software did you do?
Well, we did educational software for the SRA division of IBM. Okay. We wrote some programs for Atari, just, some rudimentary things, tape-based video games, things like that.
They contracted you to...
Yes.
Okay. Tell me all about that.
All about that?
Yeah.
Well, they gave us a couple of these things called Atari 800s. And we kind of dissected them and saw what they could do, the graphics and things, the sound effects. And we created, I really can't remember the name of the titles we created at JACC. But I'll come up with a lot more titles for you when we move on to the next one or two.
Sure. All right. Yeah, I've just been...
If I think of them, I'll go back.
I've been Googling JACC and Atari while you've been talking, and I can't find anything. So this is...
Well, JACC predates the Internet by a lot.
Sure.
I'm not sure if Zipnik would even show up in there, on a Google search.
So how did you get this gig with Atari to create contracted software? The SRA division of IBM wanted to do educational things in the classroom, and at the time, Atari really wanted to get into education stuff. There really wasn't a video game market per se. There were only a couple of cartridges available for the 800. So they were looking toward, how can we sell 100 machines at a time or 1,000 machines at a time? And a guy named Thorson, I think his name was, who was a marketing manager there, hooked us up with somebody at the SRA division of IBM who hooked us up with IBM. And we negotiated a contract and developed 125 programs for them, all educational based. Wow. So this was just you and your co-founders?
Yeah, there was
programming?
The four of us, and then we actually hired 6 other people. And we were in a warehouse in Arlington Heights, Illinois. And we were doing all that stuff. Plus, we were consulting with NEC and working with them to get CPM up and running on their system so that they could sell it as a more commercially viable system. The PC thing was because there were 2 divisions in NEC. The home group wanted a personal computer, and the business group up in Wellesley, Mass. wanted a professional computer. And this was a nice little machine with CPM running on it and BASIC and such. It had full color graphics, all kinds of really nice things. Disk drives, the whole bit. And
So we compromised and called it a PC and said, let each division do their own thing.
Cool.
And it worked out pretty good. We, as I said, we introduced it at the National Computer Conference in 1982 when IBM was just introducing what they call the 5201, I think it was, the number they gave it. And we had color, they didn't, so it was really cool. And then at the same time, Microsoft, Bill Gates, we met him through NEC, I believe. And we were working on a program that ran on the Apple, which was a application generator, where you could, with very little bit of input, create an entire assembly language program that would do all kinds of cute stuff.
Yeah, tell me about that. What was it called? I understand this might have been the first patented software.
Yeah, that was my version called Autogrammer. When we were at JACC, we did a basic version called Transact, and it didn't quite get up off the ground. But I did a version later when I was at Roklan. That's why I started Roklan, so that I could do a version that generated assembly language programs. And it did quite a bit. It did get a patent, 4536840. I got it burned into my brain. And we sold a lot of it to on the Radio Shack market. And a couple companies still ripped it off even though it was patented. And some people had a little more success with the concept. But the program generator that we did, not an application generator this time, it was a program generator.
What's the difference?
Application generators generate applications. Okay. Specific things that do specific things, usually based on data in or out, whether it's to storage or from the screen. But a program generator could generate a program that would do anything. And one of our technicians actually used our program generator to generate an applications generator, which I thought was really cool. I didn't even know he was working on it, but it took him a few weeks, because it was a fairly complex application generator, and it was mostly based around database applications and, the kind of things small businesses would use. So if you needed anything to run your business, you'd sit in front of this screen and just plot what you wanted to put in and what you wanted to come out and what the relationships were, and it would generate a program for you.
Interesting. So let's talk about, I want to tangent for a minute on getting that patented, because I understand this was the first software patent, and were there any special, I know that must have been interesting to do that, and
it was painful.
Yeah.
The patent office said flat out, you cannot patent software, get out of here. And I had an attorney by the name of Tim Gens, and he was tenacious. And he did research, he did all kinds of things, and somehow he got in with two other companies. One of them, Genentech, and the other one, some oil company. And the three attorneys went to the patent office and said, you have to be able to do this and whatever, and they threw them out. So they went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that, yes, you can patent a new life form in the case of these microbes that Genentech was working on. And yes, you could patent a process for creating a chemical, which you could do. And yes, you could patent a non-obvious software process. And lo and behold, I got the patent.
Wow.
It took about 5 years, actually.
Wow. Some would say that you opened a Pandora's box there, and now that software.
Yeah, I think so too. Sometimes, and that's primarily because a lot of the stuff that got patented later was like incredibly obvious. But a patent by itself doesn't, say that you've done something special or unique. Only that you've done something and convinced the patent office that nobody else has done it before, and it is unique. And it's really up to the industry and other companies to determine whether or not your patent is valid.
patents are meaningless until you defend them. So unless somebody licenses your patent or you defend it in court or something like that, it's pretty much worthless. But somewhere after that occurred, all these companies started negotiating with each other and licensing and cross-licensing really silly stuff, like one click to buy. That was just nuts. There's no technology involved in that kind of stuff.
Right.
But, patents went nuts. And then people started gobbling up patents and doing all kinds of weird things with it. So, yeah, it was kind of a Pandora's box, but it was mostly unintentional consequences.
Yeah.
Or unintended consequences.
Right. Okay, so you're at JCC and you're working on your autogrammer, and what was next and what happened?
Well, 420-something-year-old kids making stupid amounts of money working for big companies usually go in different directions at some point for, obvious reasons. Everybody had their own idea of what to do, how to do it, where to do it, and everything. And eventually we just fell apart. And we went our separate ways. And Todd started that company. One of the other guys went back to work for a big software company. And I went to a company called Roklan Software. It was actually a friend of mine who sold flight simulators. And the two of us started Roklan Software.
So this company already existed and you joined it, or were you one of the founders?
Well, it was a one-man company.
Okay.
There was one guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there, and the first thing that happened was I talked to Thorson again from Atari. And as a test, I did this thing called States and Capitals, and then I did Provinces and Capitals, just tape-based video games.
Uh-huh.
And he came to me with one or two of these little tape things, and I started, getting back into, Atari stuff, because I've been working like 24 hours a day on a Radio Shack Model 2, finishing up Autogrammer, which was the thing that I patented. I actually got it patented while I was Roklan. And so I started doing some more Atari stuff. And then they recommended me to Singer. And I did some, I can't even remember what I did for them. It was some sort of game-based thing. To be honest with you, I don't remember what it was.
Huh. Well, Singer they did defense contract stuff and sewing machines, as far as I know. So.
Yeah, and they had something they wanted to do with software, so I did something for them because Atari recommended me over. And then I had this idea, why don't I take a video game from an arcade and convert it over? And I'm in Chicago where, all the video game companies are. So there's a friend of mine introduced me to a guy at Midway called Dave Morofsky. He was president of Midway. Mm-hmm. And I went in and I said, hey, how about licensing some of these games to me so I could put them on home computers? And he looked me square in the eye and said, why the heck would anybody want to play a video game at home? And I thought that was, looking back on it, that was quite funny, actually. But I said, let me worry about that. Just, give me a couple licenses and I'll be happy to do it. I had a guy who was working for me who had created a version of Space Invaders. So I had that in the back of my mind that, I could get Space Invaders as a license. We could finish this game up and put out a cartridge for the Atari, and it'd be cool. But Dave was like, well, it's kind of silly, licensing things for home and stuff. Well, let me talk to my guys and I'll get back to you. And about 3 weeks later, he called me in and I went in to talk to him. I thought I'm getting licenses and everything. Everything's going to be wonderful. He's got this game called Pac Man. I'm going to get Pac Man. I'm going to get Space Invaders. I'm going to get, maybe a couple other video games. Well, I went in and he said, I don't know how to tell you this. And I said, bad news. He says, yeah, well, Atari came in yesterday and they bought Pac Man. I said, what do you mean? You promised it to me. And he says, well, they gave me a check for $1 million. I said, oh, okay, well, I can't compete with that.
Right.
But he felt really bad, so he literally gave me the license to
Wizard of War, Gorf, and kind of a pseudo agreement on Space Invaders, because Space Invaders he didn't really have the rights to. So what we did was, because the rights were spread out amongst a couple companies like Namco and Taito America, or Taito, I should say, we worked out a deal where the version that I had for Deluxe Invaders was not the same thing as what they had. So it was kind of like, just, okay, you can do it. We're not going to bother you. You can put your game out. Don't worry about it. Everything's cool. Mm-hmm. So we put out, we created these 3 projects internally and started writing the software so we could put out these 3 cartridges. A couple weeks later, I got a call from Fred Thorson. That was his name. He called me back, and he said, hey, I got another project I'd like you to look at. And he showed up in our offices in Chicago and said, we've gone to a couple of companies, and most of them say, this is not really practical, it's not going to work, and they probably couldn't even bother trying. But we'd like to put this video game that we licensed onto a cartridge on the Atari 800. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, what is this? And he says, it's called Pac Man. And I said, really? You want me to do it? I said, you guys stole that license from me. I had it all sewn up, and you took it. And he says, hey, we'll pay you. We'll pay you really good. How much do you want for doing it? And like an idiot, I said, okay, I'll do it for you, $25,000, which at the time to me was like an ungodly amount of money.
Right.
And, well, you know how much money that game made. It was just phenomenal. The best thing that came out of it, though, was at the CES show where we delivered it the morning the show opened. They put it up on every video 800 they had sitting there. Every video screen was showing Pac Man. There were a couple of them, I should say, that were showing the 5200 version, not 5200, 2600 version, mm-hmm. which was that was really bad.
Right, yeah.
Ours looked and played just like the original game. It was spectacular. And Atari told everybody who did it. And suddenly, everybody wanted Roklan Software to develop video games for them. And it took off like you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
I mean, Coleco nailed us at the show and started negotiating to develop some video games for them. CBS ended up buying the Wizard of War, Gorf, and Deluxe Invaders from us so that they could sell it under the CBS label. Everywhere I turned, somebody wanted something. Parker Brothers, I don't know how many games we did for them, but boy, did we do a lot of games for them. Frogger, Hubert, just tons and tons of different games. And it was a lot of fun. I think altogether we did like 350 video game cartridges for probably 20 different companies. We used to joke that we single-handedly collapsed the video game market by putting out too many games too quick for everybody under the sun. Mm. But it worked out really well. That, $25K that I got for Atari doing Pac Man turned out to be the best investment I ever made. I mean, Coleco had us do JACC, and there's another one. Well, anyway, I didn't. It's a big Donkey Kong. Mm-hmm. That was the biggie.
That was the pack-in for Coleco. That was like the game everybody played.
Yeah, we did the video. I didn't really know what Donkey Kong was because all I'd ever done was Pac Man at that point. Mm-hmm. And Wizard of War, Gorf, and Deluxe Invaders, and they came to us a couple of times, and I really didn't want to do it because I didn't want to get. I had autogrammer to work on, and I had all kinds of other things I wanted to do. So we were sitting in Vegas in a booth at some restaurant, and I figured, I told my partner, I'm just going to get rid of these guys because, they were making swimming pools. What did they know about video games? Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I threw a number out at them, and they said, okay. And I thought, oh, great. Now I had to reverse engineer the Mattel Intellivision, design a cartridge that didn't infringe on their patents, write a video game, and then deliver it.
We're talking the Intellivision version or the ColecoVision version?
The Intellivision version.
Oh.
That was the first one I did, the Intellivision version.
That was terrible, sir. That was a terrible, terrible version of that game. I mean,
well, it was
definitively the worst version of that game.
It was the first non-Mattel cartridge video game for the Mattel Intellivision.
Okay.
You would agree the ZACC game was a little better.
Yes.
Well, we learned a little bit, okay. In the process. Hey, I worked on E.T. I got no pride. Okay? But hey, when I got my first royalty check from Coleco, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. My partner couldn't even read the amount on the check. He looked at it and went 600. What the? And I looked at it. It was $667,000. Our first royalty check from Coleco.
Wow.
And it was like, oh my God, suddenly I wanted to do more video games. And we did. We went on and on and on. We did things for, as I said, Parker Brothers. We even got into Disney. And we did a whole ton of stuff for Disney across all kinds of machines. The Radio Shack color computer, remember that?
Sure.
At one point, we were doing like 60% of all the software for that machine. No matter who you bought it from, it was from us. We're really big into private labeling.
Mm-hmm. How many employees did you have at the top?
At the peak, we had probably 60.
Wow.
We were pioneers in work at home. We used to let a lot of people do work at home, and then I'd drive around and collect work and meet with them and sit with them and help them through problems. And there were a couple other people, like I remember Joe Gaucher. He was really good at it. He ended up working for Todd Zipnick later. But he and I, like we sat with Joe Hellison, who was the prime programmer on Pac Man. And we would sit with him into the middle of the night, working out little tiny details and compression routines and all kinds of weird stuff to get it working and fitting into a tiny little cartridge. Mm-hmm. On Wizard of War and and Gorf, which included several different mini video games in it. It takes a real long time to boot up, much more than normal, because we did 3 levels of compression. So first we took what was in the cartridge and put it into memory, and then we expanded it, then we expanded it again, and finally a third time before it would actually run, because it was a huge program to fit in a tiny, tiny little cartridge. So we tried to do something new in everything we did. On the what was it? Commodore. We did Cave of the Word Wizard, which was the first game to actually have a voice and talk to you. Mm-hmm. We did Crazy Climber for the 2600 using a technique where every frame contained slightly different information, and it took 6 or 8 frames to present the entire picture. Mm-hmm. So that in Crazy Climber, as he climbed the wall, some people would swear they could see the fingers of the guy as he climbed up. And of course, it didn't have that kind of resolution. On the IBM, which didn't have color at the time, if you hooked it to a color monitor, you could play BC's Quest for Tires, and it did full color, because we half-clocked all the pixels so that we could trick the monitor into thinking it was color. On the 2600, we developed a complete development system of our own so that we could write games quickly and efficiently. We did the same, for the Atari 800 so that we could, just thinking about it, I still have that system, the first one I built. There's a CPM-based S100 computer with a ROM emulator in it, and that's what we use to create all the cartridges. I still have somebody on eBay contacted me because they had one of my prototype cartridges, and I couldn't figure out how the heck they got it. But then I had a friend who worked for Atari, and one day he called me over to show me this new game he had that he was playing with, and it was one of my cartridges that was still in development. He was like, how did you get that? Talk about cybersecurity, or lack thereof.
Well, do you still have any software that was released? Do you have any source code? Do you have anything anymore?
I have all the source code that was ever produced by Roklan Software.
Wow. Can we save it before that media melts away?
It's mostly on 8-inch floppy disks.
Okay.
And I've got a banker's box that has probably 600, maybe 800 disks in it.
Wow.
Just filled with all the source code from every game.
Wow. Good job saving all that.
Yep. I still have the computer that they run on, and I still have the ROM emulator that goes with it. You know, this was all done on one of these super incredible computers with 64K of memory.
Right.
You know? Running CPM. It's still running CPM.
Incredible. So after this, I'd like to talk to you about borrowing that stuff so I can archive that stuff before the discs all go bad.
Well, I didn't think about the discs going bad. That's a good thing.
Yeah,
I've also got a lot
archived...
of it on hard drives too.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, I still have my first hard drive that I bought for like $1,500.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't a Corvus. We had a Corvus at JACC, but that was a couple $1,000. No, I bought a 5 megabyte hard drive for my CPM system, and it cost me $1,000 for 5 megabytes. But it held a lot of stuff in those days.
You'll never fill all that. That's huge.
Yeah, now the machine I work with every day has like 2 terabytes of storage, and I think I'll never fill that up, but you never know.
I was reading something that said you are, and this you were kind of talking about this before. It says you are considered by some to be the father of the arcade port. Just wondering how you felt about that.
That's interesting. Well, I don't know if I'm the father of it, but I certainly was a prolific mutter.
It sounds like when you mentioned before, you were like, okay, let's take some arcade games and make computer versions of that. So, you're definitely there in the early days.
Bally, most people don't remember, Bally had a console game.
Yeah.
Way back when. And they actually converted a couple of their arcade machines to it. And it was a good idea. The implementations were reasonably good. The machine was maybe a little better than the 2600, but it never caught on. Didn't really go anywhere.
Right.
And they may have been the first ones to really convert arcade games. I think they did 2 or 3 of them. I didn't know that until a long time later, because after we had success with the video games that we licensed from them, the guys over there became a little more friendly, and I ended up talking to a lot of them.
Yeah,
and,
they had
that's when they showed me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, the early 2600 games, were all, original games. Like, they weren't based on arcades. They were based sometimes on themes presented in arcades or even movies, like the James Bond video game cartridge where you raced around in a circle on a track. It wasn't really all that exciting. It wasn't until, things like Pac Man and Zaxxon and those kind of cartridges came out that actual video games could be played, like you would if you were in an arcade.
Right.
Prior to that, there really wasn't much.
Yeah. Well, the Atari 800 version of Pac Man that you guys did, it's incredible. It more than makes up for Donkey Kong on the Intellivision. Their Pac Man is delightful to play. And do you have any memories on that of what you went through to make it what it was?
Oh yeah, we Joe Hellison, who was the lead programmer on it, originally designed it to fill the screen so it was short and squat, kind of like the what was that? There was a rip-off game that was on the Atari 800 that was kind of played like Pac Man. I can't remember what it was called.
Jawbreaker.
It was Jawbreaker. Yeah, it looked like Jawbreaker, and it kind of played on its own little theme. It didn't play like Pac Man, but it looked like Jawbreaker. And what I did was I got a couple machines from Midway of Pac Man, and it was written on a Z80-based computer, and I disassembled all the code completely, and then reverse engineered it, and got the logic for all the characters out of it, and convinced Joe that we needed to make the screen look the same as it does, even if it doesn't fill the Atari, TV set completely. It still had to look like the video game. It had to have the vertical perspective, and we could use the space on the sides for other stuff. And it had to play exactly like the original game. So we had to redo all the logic and such using the information I got out of the arcade machine. And we actually got it to the point where you could put your hand on the joystick for the 800 and the joystick for the arcade and make the same moves, the same speed with two joysticks held in sync. And that's when we knew it was going to be good.
And this is for Zacon?
No, for Pac Man.
For Pac Man.
Yeah. We got all the original moves for all the characters right out of the arcade machine. All the logic.
Huh. All right, cool.
We wanted it to be as close to the original as possible. And it turned out to be pretty good. And I ended up doing that on a lot of other machines, like for other companies like Parker Brothers and things like Mousetrap and, those kind of things, where we would actually disassemble the code and look at the logic and try to adapt it so that we could use it on the 800 version.
Nice. So I'm looking at the list of games here. This is only ones that are known to have been published by Roklan. Anything you did, contract is not listed here. But I've got. I'm just going to list them. If you have any memories or anything to say, just pop right up. For the 8-bit, there was Anti-Sub Patrol.
Yeah, that was a dorky game.
Something called DeFuzz, unreleased.
Yeah, that was my first Atari 800 original, and it was just based on a maze game. There was a guy down in Florida that was developing an arcade game, and I wanted to do the home version, and I ended up doing a better version than he did. But neither one of them was very successful. The arcade machine, I'm not even sure it made it to market. The Fuzz, we didn't release. Okay.
Deluxe Invaders, which we talked a little bit about.
That was a great game.
Yeah.
That was
Gorf?
99% Joe Hellison.
Yeah.
Gorf was a team effort by a lot of people, and that was fun.
Gyruss, the Gyruss unreleased version, I don't know what they mean by that.
Well, we did a couple versions of Gyruss for Parker Brothers. And there was a version we were doing for the Atari 800, which we were supposed to get, but we had some licensing issues, so it never got out. But it was cute. The soundtrack on that was the amazing thing.
Yeah.
The music was such that it felt like the music was keeping time with the game. So that was what was cool about Gyruss.
Yeah, that one had a great soundtrack, at least the version I played, the released version. And Pac Man, and then Rock Ball. Rock Ball?
Yeah, Rock Ball was a weird, offshoot that was done by a guy out in California conceptually. He came up with the idea and we did it, and it was not one of our better activities.
Wizard of War.
Yep. I'll tell you something funny about Wizard of War.
Yeah.
Okay. We ran out of memory. Okay. The game had so many levels and it was unbelievable. What we did was we cheated, and a lot of people are going to hate hearing this, but when you got to the 19th level, which was as high as we could go, I believe, the dragons appeared right on top of you and killed you instantly. You had no chance whatsoever.
Not very nice.
The game. Well, we ran out of memory. There was nothing else we can do, so we just killed you off instantly.
Oh.
That was mean.
Yeah. Oh, what are you going to do? Cool. So all right, so you're humming along, and you're creating games like crazy for all these different platforms. And then what happened? I think I know what happened, but tell me.
What happened to what? Roklan?
Yeah, just what happened next? I mean, things are humming along great, and then I'm guessing Christmas 1983 happened, and that affected you.
Yeah, what we did was we switched over to educational software.
Mm-hmm.
The market fell out of video games. I mean, they were giving away cartridges, and things like the wonderful success of cartridges like E.T. and the rest of it kind of discouraged people from investing in big time stuff. We did some really nice things before that happened. Like Firefox was a really good successful game we did, original from the movie.
That was the Laserdisc arcade game, right?
No. We did a Atari 800 version and a 2600 version for Atari. We did a lot of stuff that was labeled by Atari. Things like Crazy Climber and stuff. Crazy Climber was their Cartridge of the Month Club. It was the first one that they offered. Things were changing. We were doing more role-playing games, those kind of things. And there wasn't really that much going on because of the way we flooded the market, frankly. So we did educational software. Mm-hmm. And we were doing stuff a lot for the color computer, some for the Atari. It was mostly with companies that most people hadn't heard of. We were doing it, with the exception being Disney. We did tons of stuff for Disney, all educational, across all platforms. We got into that originally because of the 800 at this point. We did the chairman of Disney said, Mickey Mouse will never be in a video game because computers can't render him well enough, so forget it. It ain't going to happen. Mm-hmm. And we did a demo, and he loved it. Next thing you knew, we were doing tons of work. They were hard to work with, though, real hard. I mean, they were nuts. So we did educational stuff for about a year and a half, and a lot of the guys didn't like doing education, so a lot of people decided to move on and do other things. A couple of guys left and started their own company in the Chicago area. Some of them moved to California to go to work for some of the new big studios that were starting up. Mm-hmm. And it was changing. So Roklan just eventually ceased to be. My associate, Larry, was more into racehorses at this point. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, but he was buying all kinds of expensive things and foreign sports cars and stuff like that. And I was getting old and tired. I must have been 24 years old. I was just getting beat to death.
Sure, over the hill at that point.
Yeah, so I basically left Roklan, and about 9 months later, my partner shut it down and closed it. And then I opened up another company called MTDC, for Microtechnology Development Corp., and started working again for Parker Brothers and did a little more work for Disney and some odds and ends here and there, but it wasn't the same as it used to be. Yeah. So after a couple of years of that, I decided not only wasn't I happy with that, I didn't want to be in Chicago anymore. Things were changing, so I ended up packing up all my stuff and moving to the East Coast, which is where I'm at now in Virginia.
Nice. And what do you do today to keep yourself busy?
Well, I just invented a new tool for a local company that makes barriers for highways. I do a lot of design work for proprietary systems, where somebody needs a custom computer system for something. And I actually spent the last 10 years mostly involved in weapon systems for the military. Mm-hmm. I worked for people like Northrop and General Dynamics. And I worked on things that go into tanks and ships and, to shoot the bad guys.
Sure.
to protect us.
Right. Well, good.
I only did video games that did not feature violence against people.
Really?
And then I end up in weapon systems.
So why was that your line in the sand about no violence against people?
I don't know. It just seemed right. We the closest we came to it was Urban Strike, which we did for Sega, and we did one for Nintendo also. And it was kind of like at a distance. And at that point, we thought it was getting a little too close to real violence.
Mm-hmm.
All of our characters were just animations and things like that. Suddenly, we had real cities, and there was a potential for real people. We didn't have any real people there, but we turned down Death Race 2000 and Robotron 2014, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. 2084, yeah.
2084, yeah, but because of the violence. But, we try to keep it fun for little kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then now everything is, role-playing, shoot-'em-up, first-person shooters and things like that, and never really got into that.
Right.
So I try to make a living doing something where I could push the edge of software without creating video games. Although some of the stuff we did comes pretty close to video games. We created simulators for the weapon system, so you'd sit in the lab and lob imaginary projectiles at ships, 15 miles away on the sea, and see if you could hit them. And if the software worked, then we'd take it out and do it for the real thing. It was pretty strange.
I want to get back for a minute to, you mentioned like states and capitals and provinces and capitals and stuff that you guys created that probably no one knows that was created by Roklan. I'm wondering if you have anything else at the tip of your tongue that, even in the educational category that you guys created for the Atari.
I keep thinking of, Mickey and the Great Outdoors, which was an Atari-based game by Disney.
Or Disney, right? Yeah.
Yeah, obviously. Peter Pan's The Great Adventures. Nobody ever heard of that one. There were a lot of those. States and capitals and those kind of things are things that I did, 100% on my own. We had no employees at the time or anything like that. By the time we got to Disney, we had art departments, 5 people in the art group, and 50 programmers and administration people. It was a big business at that point.
Right.
I kind of liked it better when it was just me.
Yeah.
Everybody else got to have all the fun.
I found a quote from you in 1994. I'm going to read you this quote. I'd like to know if you stand by it or would like to change any of the statement. You said, I own stock in Atari. I believe in Atari in every way, shape, and form, and I believe that the Jaguar is the most viable platform on the market.
Yeah, I got screwed on that one, didn't I? Well, there was I forget which brother it was, one of the Tremilles. I was making real progress with him. We were going to do a web browser for the Jaguar and a few other things. And then, he's president of the company and he has a heart attack. And suddenly there's nobody in charge of the company. And nobody wanted to be in charge of the company. And everything just kind of fell apart. And it was like, live and learn. There was nothing I could do about it. I really thought that machine, and I still believe today, if it had continued on, it probably would have done really, really well in the market. Had a lot of great capabilities.
Yeah.
But without a company to back it,
right,
not going anywhere.
That's true.
There's been a lot of those. When the guys from Atari, I'm trying to remember, there were 3 VPs who left Atari, left the 800 behind and created a new machine. And I can't remember the name of it. You probably know better than I do.
Well, there were so many VPs. I probably know the names, but I could list 50 names and not hit them.
But the company they started, the I can't remember the computer day.
And some guys left to form Mindset, and some guys formed...
Yeah, that's Mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to work with those guys too, and that just fell apart also. I was in there at the beginning when they just had the prototypes.
Right, that was another company that didn't go very far.
No.
But they had some cool hardware.
Yep. And I wanted to give them cool software.
Yeah. So what haven't I asked you about the Atari days that I should have?
Oh. Let's see. Well, I guess the big thing is, I got a funny one for you. The Atari 800, when it came out, when the machine was first introduced, one of those many VPs came out and said, it's a closed system.
Okay.
It's all unique to us. Nobody can put anything into it except us. We have total control over it. 2 weeks later, I introduced a memory board that plugged into it. Just to piss them off. But in general, it was just a very beginning, and there were ups and downs in it. Eventually, it all died away, and the legacy is going to be around for a long time. I mean, there's just a lot of people who remember it. It's kind of like the oldies, 80s music, as long as any of those people are alive, the Atari will stay alive too.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, Piracy. Your stuff was mostly released on cartridge, so I imagine this wasn't that huge of a concern, but were you thinking about Piracy?
Oh yeah, we did a couple things. First thing we did was we worked with General Instruments to produce what we call chip on board, where instead of a regular integrated circuit, we had a little, just the inside of it, the die, which was attached to a circuit board and covered with epoxy, which made it impossible for anybody to pull the chip off, read it, dump it, and then analyze it and make copies of it.
Okay.
That worked for a while. And then we did encoded memory chips, also with General Instrument and National Semiconductor, where we had a specially designed ROM chip where certain addresses would cause memory banks to switch. So if you didn't know what the addresses were or what to put in those addresses, what you came up with was a random series of pages with no connection between them. So, and you couldn't copy it because some of the addresses were actually switches that would switch memory banks. So you'd copy it, and depending on how you did it, you might get a different copy every time you do it, and you couldn't make one copy that had the entire program in it. So we did that as to try to get a little bit of security on it. We also did, when we started doing CD-ROMs later, we came up with encoding methods that made CD-ROM copies impossible because we put bad formatted stuff in the middle as an example, and we'd skip over it. But, if you were trying to copy it, it couldn't skip over it. It would just die. So we did a lot of odds and ends to try to stop people from copying their stuff.
Did that work?
Yeah, pretty much all of it worked for the time.
Right.
Eventually, I think mostly because of internal issues, somebody in the would try to impress one of their friends, and they tell them what we did, and next thing you know, everybody knows our security because one employee couldn't keep his mouth shut. That kind of stuff. That's always the weakest link.
Sure.
People.
If you could send a message to the Atari 8-bit users who still exist, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
Hang in there. Have fun. It's a lot more fun than the stuff today. I mean, following these complex storylines, doing the rest of it, it's not an escape. It's just, you go back to the old games, they challenge you forever. They're a lot of fun, and you can do it for 5 minutes or you can do it for 5 hours. Today's stuff just doesn't do that.
Thank you, Ron. This was fantastic. It's exactly what I wanted.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Cool. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.